We all live by the clock, don't we? A relentless, invisible current pulling us forward. We mark our days, our years by its unwavering rhythm. But what if, one ordinary night, that rhythm faltered? What if time itself decided to play a cruel trick, trapping you in a single unending moment? Arthur was a man who appreciated routine, not in a rigid, obsessive way, but in the quiet comfort it offered. His small apartment filled with books and the scent of old paper was his sanctuary. Every night, precisely at 2:30 in the morning, he'd turn off his reading lamp, the soft click echoing in the silence, and settle into bed. A predictable life, a peaceful life, until it wasn't. It was 2:33 in the morning. Arthur had just drifted off. Then a sharp, insistent thump from the apartment above jolted him awake. He sighed, glanced at the digital clock on his nightstand. 2:33. He closed his eyes, willing sleep to return. A minute later, or so he thought, the thump came again. He frowned. That was odd. He looked at the clock, still 2:33, a flicker of unease. He rubbed his eyes, convinced he was just groggy. He watched the numbers. They didn't change. The red digits remained stubbornly fixed. 2:33. He sat up, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He reached for his phone. The screen glowed, displaying the exact same time. He tried to scroll, to open an app, but the phone seemed frozen, unresponsive. He threw back the covers, his heart beginning to pound. He walked to the window, pulled back the curtain. The streetlights outside cast long, unchanging shadows. A lone car was parked exactly where it had been moments ago. Nothing moved. The world was utterly still. He tried to rationalize it. A power outage affecting all clocks. A bizarre dream. He pinched himself, hard. The pain was real. He walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water. The water flowed, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. He drank it, the cold liquid a stark contrast to the growing heat of his panic. He looked at the microwave clock, 2:33. He looked at the oven clock, 2:33. Every single time-telling device in his apartment was stuck. He tried to leave. He fumbled with the lock on his front door, his hands trembling. He pulled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the door itself was frozen, part of the unmoving tableau. He pushed, he pulled, he even kicked it, but it remained steadfastly shut. He was trapped. Trapped in his apartment, trapped in this single, unending minute. The first few hours, or what felt like hours, were a blur of frantic attempts. He shouted, his voice hoarse, but no one answered. He tried to break a window, but the glass felt impossibly strong, unyielding. He paced, he sat, he lay down. He got up again. Each time he checked a clock, it was 2:33. The thump from upstairs, the one that had woken him, repeated every few minutes, a cruel, mocking reminder of the loop. It was always the same thump, the same intensity, the same exact moment in its sound. Then the subtle changes began. He noticed it first with a book on his coffee table. He was certain he had left it closed, spine facing outwards. But after what felt like 100 repetitions of that same minute, he saw it. The book was open, face down, a page slightly creased. He stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. He closed it, placed it back precisely as he remembered. The next loop, it was open again. His mind reeled. Was he going insane? Was he hallucinating? He started looking for other discrepancies. A picture frame on the mantelpiece, which he knew was perfectly straight, was now tilted ever so slightly. A pen on his desk, which he'd left lying flat, was now resting on its cap. These weren't dramatic shifts, but they were enough. Enough to suggest that something was happening, something beyond his comprehension. Something was moving things, And then, the hallway. He'd always ignored the hallway outside his apartment door. It was just a passage, a means to an end, but now it began to feel different. He started noticing a faint, almost imperceptible shadow under his door. A shadow that seemed to stretch a fraction of an inch further with each loop. He'd dismiss it as his imagination, a trick of the light, but it persisted. Then came the sound, a soft, almost inaudible scrape. It wasn't the thump from upstairs, this was different. It was closer, originating from just outside his door. He pressed his ear against the wood, holding his breath. Nothing. The loop reset. The scrape again. It was like something was being dragged, slowly, deliberately towards his door. Fear, cold and sharp, began to replace his confusion. He wasn't just trapped, he was being approached. By what? He had no idea. He tried to barricade the door with furniture, but the moment the loop reset, the furniture was back in its original place, the door unblocked. He was helpless. He was a spectator in his own nightmare. The shadow under the door grew longer, darker. The scrape became more distinct, punctuated by a faint, wet slurp. His imagination conjured grotesque images. He huddled in the corner of his living room, watching the door, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even think clearly. The endless repetition, the subtle shifts, the encroaching presence from the hallway. It was a torment designed to break him. He knew he couldn't stay. The terror of the unknown, of whatever was slowly, inexorably making its way to his door, became unbearable. He had to break the loop. He had to escape. And there was only one way out, one thing he hadn't fully tried. He had to step into the hallway. It was a desperate gamble, a leap into the abyss, but the alternative was to wait for whatever horror was approaching. He stood before the door, his hand hovering over the cold metal handle. His breath hitched. He could feel the cold radiating from beneath the door now, a palpable chill that seeped into his bones. He could almost smell something metallic, something ancient. With a surge of adrenaline, a primal scream trapped in his throat, he twisted the handle. The door opened. The world outside was not the same. The hallway was dark, choked with dust and cobwebs. The air was thick, stale, heavy with the scent of decay. The apartment door across from his was gone, replaced by a crumbling brick wall. The floorboards creaked under his feet, not with the familiar sound of his building, but with the groan of ancient rotting wood. He stepped out, his eyes wide, scanning the desolate corridor. The scrape and slurp were gone. The shadow was gone. The loop was broken. But at what cost? He looked back at his apartment. The door was still open, revealing a glimpse of his living room. But it too was different. Dust motes danced in a single shaft of light from a boarded-up window. His books were still there, but their covers were faded, brittle. Some pages crumbling, he stumbled forward, down the hallway, his mind struggling to process the impossible. He reached the end where the main stairwell should have been. Instead, there was a gaping hole in the wall, revealing a shattered window looking out onto a cityscape he didn't recognize. Towering, futuristic buildings pierced the smoggy sky. The familiar skyline of his city was gone, replaced by a metallic, alien landscape. A tattered, yellowed newspaper lay on the floor, half buried under debris. He picked it up, his fingers trembling. The date. He stared at the date. It wasn't October 1, 2025. It was October 1, 2075. 50 years. 50 years had passed. The thump from upstairs, the one that had woken him. The one that had repeated endlessly, was a memory from half a century ago. The car parked outside, the one he'd seen frozen in time, was long gone, rusted into oblivion. His friends, his family, his entire life had continued without him, lived out their years, grown old, perhaps even passed away. He was a ghost, a relic from a forgotten era, stepping into a future that was not his own. The silence of the hallway was no longer just the absence of sound. It was the deafening roar of lost time, of a life unlived. The fear of what was approaching him in the loop was nothing compared to the crushing weight of what he had truly lost. He was free from the minute that never ended, but he was now trapped in a future that had no place for him. He was utterly, irrevocably alone. The clock, once a tormentor, now mocked him with its relentless forward march, a march he had missed, a march that had left him behind.